Greetings and welcome. This happens to be the 16th. 16th what? Well, we can call it a webinar that has been arranged for by ICC Sri Lanka in association with the Sri Lanka China Business Council of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, then to the Colombo Stock Exchange have joined us on this occasion as co-arrangers or organizers, the European Chamber of Sri Lanka and the Daily FT. And we have also some sponsorship, and we are grateful for the support offered us by Omega Line Limited. Now, there is no reason to try and figure out why it is that we have a topic such as the one that has been selected and chosen on this occasion. Yes, now we have just seen an introductory clip, and we do recognize that economic diplomacy is not really that strange or unusual. And what we were able to enjoy just a moment ago was really a focus on what is being done in Spain. The question now is, can the same obtain here for Sri Lanka? The focus on Sri Lanka. And we do believe that it can. Not only that, we recognize that it must be the focus for fairly obvious reasons. Now, Sri Lanka is facing some challenges, and the young people of this country have their own aspirations. They want to be able to move forward. But now, quite aside from the pandemic, there are other challenges that seem to interfere a great deal with the onward progress of this country. So what is it that embassies, our foreign missions, are able to do and should do? I'm reminded of a kind of a tongue-in-cheek publication of some years ago by a former diplomat who served Sri Lanka, and that's Professor Edivira Sarachandra. And the title of his book, which was based roughly on his own experience as an ambassador, he was in France for sure back in the 1970s or something. And the title of his book was With a Begging Bowl. Not a very engaging title, certainly not in the present day. The role of the embassy, the role of the staff at an embassy and in a high commission is no more the role of beggar or with a begging bowl. Rather, there is a need to foster. Foster what? Exports, build up tourism, and certainly investments. This is a responsibility that must be taken very seriously, and it will be taken seriously. And with that, then this deep concern that we have at the present time of a lack of reserves and foreign reserves will certainly find solution. So it is with that in mind that we now would like to invite all of those who are joining us, whether it be via Facebook, whether it be via YouTube, Port City, or whether it's on Event TV, which is a local channel that can be observed, channel 120 of the television, and also on Pure TV. That too will be carrying the same thing. But around the globe, it is our understanding that many of the foreign missions, those that are serving Sri Lanka in different parts of the globe, will be taking serious note of what this webinar contains and will include. So we have 38 embassies in non-Commonwealth countries. We have 13 high commissions in Commonwealth countries, 13 consulates, and then we have 2 permanent missions in the United Nations. So all of those, we believe, will have a role to play in fostering that which we referred to a moment ago. What is it that we're fostering? Hopefully business ties, business communication. And there will be a need to push forward, to engage, to involve, to be innovative, as well as initiate, and on occasion even intervene. So it's not a passive role at all. And we're going to learn a great deal more from our distinguished panelists when the discussion starts. But I'd like to start off with an invitation to someone who is vitally involved with the International Chamber of Commerce. He's the ICC representative, director with Geneva. And he's also the ICC permanent observer at the United Nations. And he served previously his own country of Australia as an ambassador. And I refer to Mr. Crispin Conroy. And he has a background in international law from his university, Australian National University. And he's now poised and ready for his presentation. So we'd like very much to invite your attention as Crispin Conroy addresses us. So over to Crispin, please.
First of all, let me thank ICC Colombo for the invitation to give the presentation today on the role embassies and consulates can play in promoting exports and investment, and by extension, the role diplomats, not just commercial attachés, but also ambassadors can play in close coordination, and I'll come back to this later, with the National Investment or Trade Promotion Agency. As my ICC Colombo colleagues know, I'm currently on leave for the European summer in Sardinia. So from one beautiful island to another beautiful island, Sri Lanka, welcome to all participants. The topic that today is one that is close to my heart because of my own professional experience. I was an Australian diplomat for over 25 years, including as ambassador and then senior trade and investment commissioner, promoting Australian trade and investment in Latin America, and as consul general and senior trade and investment commissioner in Milan, leading the Australian government's efforts to increase foreign direct investment from Italy in specific strategic sectors for the Australian economy. So I've seen firsthand how an effective economic diplomacy strategy can contribute to achieving a government's economic development goals. And in my current role as Ambassador, Permanent Observer to the United Nations in Geneva for the ICC and ICC Representative Director, I'm working closely with the World Association of Investment Promotion Agencies, WIPO, to increase business engagement with investment promotion agencies, or IPAs, including through the creation of a business advisory board for WIPO, and ICC will be the main partner on this business advisory board, and through contributing to the World Trade Organization discussions on the initiative on investment facilitation for development. I joined ICC 2 years ago from the Australian government and was asked to open the ICC office in Geneva and to lead ICC's work with the World Trade Organization, the United Nations agencies in Geneva, such as the World Health Organization and other agencies, and also the World Intellectual Property Organization and, as I've already mentioned, WIPO. Today, I will provide a few practical comments on the role embassies, consulates, and diplomats can play. They are based on my own experience and on the recent training events I've undertaken with WIPO, the most recent being with the Investment Promotion Agency of Jordan. So first, and though it may seem obvious, it's crucial to get to know your home and host country business environments, the strengths and key sectors, the market gaps, for example, and meet the people, get to understand their business language. And by this, I mean the way they talk about their strategies and their objectives. Let me give you an example from my time in Latin America. Before being posted to Chile about 15 years ago as ambassador, with concurrent accreditation to Bolivia, Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru, the Australian Foreign Minister at the time and senior officials gave me my instructions, which were basically to keep the bilateral relationship with Chile on an even keel, to maintain the positive relationship on key multilateral issues, like the Cairns group of agricultural companies in countries in the WTO, but not to discuss a potential free trade agreement with Chilean counterparts, as Australia was very focused on its engagement with Asia and didn't consider such an FT as a priority. Once I arrived at post, I met with a range of Australian business representatives, some from large resource companies, others from medium and small equipment, technology and services companies. And the strong message was that they wanted the Australian government to recalibrate its commercial engagement strategy with Chile and other key countries in the region. The Australian business community saw significant opportunities for growth in both trade and investment in the Chilean market, but needed the government to get behind them. They were seeking an ambitious commercial engagement strategy from the government, not just in Chile, but in other key markets like Peru and Colombia. Although an FTA with Chile was not considered a priority at that time, as I mentioned, I identified these opportunities. And as a result, over the next 6 to 12 months, through targeted economic reporting, a program of high-level visits both ways, and both government and business, and meetings between Australian business leaders and relevant ministers, the foreign minister, and it was the same foreign minister, decided it was in Australia's national interest to begin negotiations with Chile on a free trade agreement. And this was completed within 12 months, almost unheard of for an FTA negotiation. And then this led to a double tax agreement, which was very important for business, and to a review of our commercial engagement strategy with the entire Latin American region, which I was asked to lead. So, first important point, talk to business, listen to business. Secondly, it is a team approach. We're focusing today on the role of embassies and consulates. But the work of diplomats, whether it be promoting trade or investment, will not be effective unless there is a seamless relationship with the national trade and investment promotion agencies and within the diplomatic mission itself. In this context, let me highlight several points which may well be raised in discussion by other panelists. We must all be singing from the same hymn sheet. In other words, there must be a common narrative shared by those at our diplomatic missions engaging with overseas clients and partners, and the national authorities with whom those in the national agencies that overseas clients and partners will have to deal with in country. In my postings in Latin America and then in Italy, we referred to the Team Australia approach. That may sound a bit corny, but we realized that this Australian-based and overseas-based consistency and harmony was crucially important for our success and credibility. For example, in Italy, we managed to achieve a significant investment in the Australian renewable energy sector, where we badly needed foreign investment and technical experience because of a seamless relationship between the post and Australian-based teams, including regular joint calls with our Italian client and joint planning of country visits to Australia and to sites and projects. Our diplomats can quickly lose credibility in market if the story they're telling is simply not reflected once the client arrives and meets with local authorities. And news travels fast in the business community, so other companies will soon know of their peers' experience. In relation to an investment strategy and narrative, WIPA recommends that a framework be developed with the collaboration of all relevant parties, like the ones participating today, the diplomatic arm, the investment promotion agency, and the private sector. WIPA also recommends diplomats have training sessions with the IPA and the private sector prior to postings. I have also experienced the importance of a team approach in action at post as well, as an ambassador working closely on a trade and in-country investment strategy with our Trade and Investment Commission attaché in Chile, and then as Senior Trade and Investment Commissioner in Milan myself, working with our ambassador in Rome on a foreign direct investment strategy. An ambassador is often, I'd say usually, able to open doors and arrange high-level meetings more easily than his or her commercial attaché. However, once that initial contact has been made, the commercial attaché can start building the necessary relationships with the company, with the ambassador only needing to re-engage if and when necessary. But that seamless relationship between the commercial side and the diplomatic side can be really effective in attracting clients and persuading them of the benefits of investment. Thirdly, and finally, I'll conclude on a point that I believe is to be critical: the need to see a trade or investment relationship as an ongoing one, rather than a simple one-off transaction. It's tempting, including through a KPI system, to just count the number of investment leads or actual investments, or the number of companies that one has assisted in a trade transaction, and then to move on to the next one. In other words, just tick the box and move on to the next target. But this approach fails to consider the nature of commercial engagement, which is about ongoing relationships. Let me focus in this context on investment. Once an investor decides to invest, this is really just the beginning of the story. She or he will need all sorts of assistance and support as the investment process proceeds. As one of the main objectives of encouraging foreign investment is to ensure that it is productive for the receiving country, that is to create jobs and develop industries, for example, and not just to make money for the foreign company, it's critical that both the local promotion agencies and the diplomatic missions maintain contact with the investor, and if possible, solve problems that could lead to the company withdrawing if just left on its own. We call this aftercare services. Such an approach, not only investment, but also in trade relationships, can help minimize any potential reputational damage should an investor have a bad experience. And importantly, if the investment is going well, it may be possible to encourage the investor to consider expansion or to identify with him or her new projects. So thank you for the opportunity to address you today and to share some of my experiences. Please reach out to me should you wish to get more information on ICC's work with WIPA on support for national investment promotion agencies, which through my experience be extremely useful. Thank you very much.
To the United Nations, one in New York, Geneva, and in Vienna. So all of those will have a role to play and can play a role under this theme that we have selected today. So what can be done? Now, as was advertised and made note of, we do have a conversation that has been arranged for with a former ambassador from the United States who served here in Sri Lanka. That's Mr. Robert O. Blake. Now, he is currently in the United States of America, and if we take a look at the clock, we will find that it is very, very early in the morning there. So it was decided that it would be prudent to have the conversation with him recorded previously, which we do now have. But let me introduce Robert Blake. He served as the United States Assistant Secretary of State for South and Central Asian Affairs from 2009 until 2013. And he's an alumnus of Harvard College and also read for his master's degree in international relations from the Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies. And of course, as would be known, he has served all of his professional life in the foreign service of the United States. And also, as it was mentioned, he has been here in Sri Lanka and was engaged very much with Sri Lanka civil society as well, and practiced what we might be able to refer to as public diplomacy. I'm not sure that everyone appreciated that, but certainly Mr. Robert Blake chose to do that. Now, His Excellency is in the United States of America and did engage in this brief conversation with the incumbent president of the ICC Sri Lanka, Dinesh Virakuri. So let's watch and listen.
Hi, Bob. Great to have you on our program. Can I begin by asking you, what is the new job description for a diplomat post-pandemic, other than doing the regular cocktail circuits and after-dinner speeches?
Well, Dinesh, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to participate in today's webinar. And I want to send my very warm greetings to the many Sri Lankan friends who are also going to be speaking on this. To answer your question, I think the pandemic has had really a lot of positive impacts on diplomacy. And the first is on digital diplomacy, as we're talking today. Zoom and other conferencing tools have really become accepted forms of diplomatic communication. So diplomats and business people no longer have to travel thousands of miles for meetings that can be done over Zoom in 30 to 60 minutes. And of course, if those meetings turn out to be productive, then you can make the trip. But I think we save a lot of time. Second, Zoom and Teams have become wonderful tools for public diplomacy for embassies around the world. So whereas if an embassy wanted to organize a speech for an ambassador to explain business opportunities in their country, you might be lucky to get 200 people. But with Zoom, you can get listeners from not only all over the country, but all over the world. And so it's a terrific tool, I think, for commercial diplomacy. Now, of course, I think the sensitive negotiations are still going to have to be done in person. And we all know that a lot of the greatest breakthroughs in diplomatic history have always been not across the table, but in the informal chats that take place at the bar or for a little quiet walk in the park. So, in those cases, digital diplomacy is really not going to be that useful. But overall, I think it's had a positive impact.
Thank you. How do you describe the impact of economic diplomacy on investment and exports? And do you think that government should set KPIs for ambassadors?
Yeah, as somebody who worked in the American Foreign Service for 31 years, I think that the diplomatic presence is going to remain super important for every country as they want to promote their products and promote more investment into their countries, because it's only through that on the ground staff that a country can develop a list of the companies that might be interested in opportunities in your country. And you need your economic officers to be proactive and not just sit in their offices and wait for people to call. If there's one thing that I sometimes notice about foreign embassies here in Washington, is that they're not proactive enough. They need to get out there and meet people and talk to people and figure out what sectors offer the best opportunities, and then actively reach out to those companies that are involved in those sectors to explain what the opportunities are in those sectors. And they also need to introduce themselves to the chambers of commerce, to the think tanks, and to all the other platforms where their ambassador or their commercial officer could potentially be invited to speak. And of course, they've got to cultivate good relations with the government, and in our case, with the US Congress, because they have an important say over things like GSP and that kind of thing. So you really do need active commercial diplomats, and of course the ambassador is very, very important. But just the ambassador, he or she has got to have a really solid team of experts behind him or her.
Given the importance of the developed countries, how should government set about addressing those missions and those countries?
Well, again, I think you're gonna have to just get people to get, first of all, make sure you have a good experienced staff, but then make sure that your people are spending most of their time outside of their offices. Again, actively promoting business opportunities, developing ideas for potential business partners, for example. A lot of American companies aren't that experienced with working overseas, and so they, you tell them about Sri Lanka, or you tell them about India or Indonesia, it's a kind of scary thing for them to think about. So if you can explain not only what the opportunities are, but who are some of the potentially good business partners in those countries who can help them navigate and take advantage of those opportunities, that's going to make an enormous difference. And of course, you need to have people who are knowledgeable about financing. And of course, you need to have people who are good at cultivating relations with the government decision makers and regulators. And all of those things will be important to help your companies to succeed in these challenging markets, because everybody's upping their game now, because everybody wants to create jobs through exports. So I think governments around the world are very wise to put a real premium on this and make this one of the central parts of not only the ambassador's job, but really most of the people in the embassy need to be thinking about this.
You talked about chambers of commerce. How should diplomats work with these chambers?
Yeah, chambers of commerce like the AmCham in Sri Lanka play a really vital role that is often not really very well understood. For one thing, they advocate on behalf of American companies for measures to improve the ease of doing business, to help reduce taxes, to clarify regulatory uncertainties of one sort or another. They also play a very, very important role for small and medium-sized enterprises who usually don't have the resources to hire someone on the ground in markets all over the world. So they really rely on these AmChams to help them out. And frankly, there are also times when individual companies don't want to raise difficult issues like, let's say, corruption, because they might fear retribution from the government. So in those kind of cases, it's actually very useful to have the AmCham raise those kinds of system-wide issues on their behalf and on behalf of other companies. So the chambers play an enormously important role, and it's important to work very closely with them.
Should ambassadors actually canvass on behalf of their companies in the host country?
They can. The only thing they need to be careful of, and we did this ourselves in America, is that you've got to be careful not to play favorites. So if, for example, there's a big contract in Sri Lanka to build a power plant or something like that, you might have several American companies that are interested, General Electric and others, and you can't play favorites. So what we do is we have a special advocacy center set up within the Department of Commerce, and companies apply to that advocacy center to be approved for advocacy by the ambassador. And then if there's only one company, then that's great. And you've gotten approval and you can go ahead and promote that company. But if there are more than one company, then you have to just promote America without, you have to be clear that there are several companies that are interested and we want an American company to win, but it's up to the government to choose which one. So yes, you can promote companies, but do it in a way that you're not playing favorites.
How does good governance and all fit into all these fit into this equation?
Governance is actually just an essential part of doing business these days. American companies around the world are looking at doing business in places that are going to be easy to do business in. So that's why things like the World Bank Index of Ease of Doing Business is so important, because it creates competition and it creates a mechanism for companies and countries to measure how they're doing vis-a-vis other countries. And the smart countries of the world are climbing the ladder of the ease of doing business. But governance is not just about the ease of doing business. It's about things like corruption, reducing corruption, and also about rule of law. American companies, and really all companies, want to be sure that there's going to be a level playing field wherever they're operating. And they want to be sure that they're going to have access to things like independent arbitration if there's an investment dispute. So those are really important things for any country to develop and make sure that they can provide reassurances to investors on those scores.
Can you also share your experience working with multilateral agencies as an ambassador?
With what, sorry?
Multilateral agencies like the World Bank and the IMF.
Multilateral. Yeah. Well, first of all, multilateral agencies themselves sometimes have commercial opportunities for companies. So that's important for people to recognize. And oftentimes people don't pay sufficient attention to that. But also, as I said, the World Bank in particular plays an enormously important role working with governments to improve their ease of doing business. And so they have very, very detailed criteria that they've established. And the smartest companies and countries in the world work closely with the World Bank to try to improve their ranking on that index. And it pays dividends for them because they can attract more investment because people do pay attention to that.
What advice would you offer a young ambassador who is joining, a young diplomat who is joining the foreign service for the first time to become effective in his role?
Yeah, well, one of the things that I always tell young diplomats is that the two things that they're going to always have to be skillful at, and that they should begin to cultivate skills in. One is public diplomacy, because every single diplomat overseas is a public diplomacy officer and somebody who needs to communicate to a wide range of audiences about your country, and everybody should be a public diplomacy officer. So that's a skill to develop. And the other one is commercial diplomacy, because at the end of the day, embassies have to prove their worth to people back home. And one of the best ways and easiest ways to do that is to help promote your business and to provide exports that are going to create jobs back home, that are going to create economic opportunities for your people back home. And so commercial diplomacy is an absolutely essential part of every embassy around the world's role. And I think, again, I think many foreign embassies here in Washington don't do probably as much as they could and should. And so I'm really glad that you're organizing this seminar, because it's important to really reinforce that.
I have two final questions to wrap this session up.
Please.
How important are NGOs, in this game?
Yeah, well, we've already talked a little bit about the AmCham, but there are other NGOs that work as well on things like corruption, that work on a whole variety of issues that affect the business climate. So again, I think governments, one of the sad trends now in the world is that many foreign governments are cracking down on NGOs and making it more difficult for them to operate in many of these countries. And I think that's a mistake, because again, the most successful countries in the world in terms of attracting business are the ones with the best governance. And particularly that's true for smaller countries that don't have huge markets. If you're a country like India that has a huge market, then maybe you can get away with having some small problems. But if the smaller the country you are, the more you have to be at the very top of your game and have the best possible governance, independent rule of law, and a very solid business climate that's going to be attractive. Because if you don't have that, people are just not going to have the patience to do business there. They're going to go and find other countries where it's easier to do business and there are better opportunities.
My final question, I'm sure you like this question. What really kept you up at night when you were in Sri Lanka as ambassador? And what advice would you offer Sri Lanka?
I thought this was only a 12-minute seminar. Well, probably it wasn't anything to do with the government. It was much more, the LTTE and all of the problems that we were trying to deal with there. But I will say that everybody thought that being ambassador in Sri Lanka was this terrible ordeal. I did come under quite a lot of criticism from both sides for trying to kind of be independent and try to do the right thing. But I didn't lose sleep at night over that. I always tried to stay true to our values and what was the right thing to do. And as long as you feel like you're doing the right thing, then you can sleep well at night. So I never worried too much about the criticism that I got from either side, because I knew that we were staying true to American values. And we just had a wonderful time in Sri Lanka, despite occasional bombings and things like that. And we always enjoy going back to your lovely country.
Any advice to strengthen the relationship?
Well, again, just what I talked about before, particularly on the business front. I think Sri Lanka has many opportunities for American companies. I think there's terrific opportunities in the energy sector for promoting clean energy. I think there's opportunities in tourism, on the digital side. You've got some very smart people that could really do some important back office work, and you've had some success in that area. So I think Sri Lanka has plenty of opportunities, and it just needs to do as much as they can, like every other country in the world, to improve their business climate, to make sure that there's, again, a good rule of law, make sure that there's no corruption. And if they can do those things, then they can succeed. And certainly, I'm happy to play my role in that as well, because as a friend of Sri Lanka, I do want to see your country succeed, and I do want to see continued strong trade and investment between our two countries.
Thank you, Bob. It was great talking to you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. And again, my warm greetings to all of my friends.
We certainly are very grateful for those perspectives that have been forwarded to us by a former ambassador from the United States serving here in Sri Lanka some years ago, Robert O. Blake. And he is a person who has a deep understanding of this country and its culture and its people. So those insights were useful and will provide an opportunity to take forward in the panel discussion to follow. Now, we have, in fact, 3 moderators who serve us today, and I'm happy to introduce the first of them, and this will be the first time that he is joining with ICC Sri Lanka. So I'll introduce the panel in just a moment, but the first of our moderators is a former ambassador to the Netherlands, France, and Spain, Mr. Buddhi Atauda, and he has a master's degree, an MBA in finance from Radford University in the United States. And also he has been conducting research in finance during that time that he was with the MBA program. And his career in the foreign service began in the year 2007, and his first posting was in Germany, where he served as Consul General. And during the time that he was there in Germany, Buddhi co-founded the Diplomatic Council, a global think tank. And then he went on to serve in other nations as well, served as the ambassador for Sri Lanka to the Kingdom of the Netherlands, and also served in France, and concurrently served Andorra, Kingdom of Monaco, Portugal, and Spain. So that's Buddhi. Now, he will be the moderator in the first round of questions, but the panel, we have a very distinguished panel, and I'm delighted to be able to introduce everyone by name, and Buddhi will be doing the honors and picking who he wants to speak with first. But in my list, I have the former Minister of Foreign Affairs, serving the government of Sri Lanka some years ago, Mr. Rohitha Bogollagama, and we certainly welcome him. Also, the former Secretary to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Bernard Gunathilaka. Then we have the High Commissioner for Sri Lanka to the United Kingdom, Her Excellency Saroja Sirisena, Her Excellency Sashikala Premwardena, serving as the High Commissioner for Sri Lanka in Singapore. Then we have another dear friend of Sri Lanka, currently now serving as the Ambassador for Bangladesh in the Netherlands, but he certainly was here in Colombo not too long ago, His Excellency Riaz Hamidullah. Welcome, Riaz. Good to be able to have you joining us on this occasion too. Then we have Dr. Palitha Kohana, the Ambassador for Sri Lanka, currently serving in the People's Republic of China, and he too served previously both in the United Nations as well as serving as a Secretary to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the government of Sri Lanka a decade or so ago. Then we have Mr. Wiki Wikramatunga, who is the Honorary Consul for Israel. We have Dr. Laksari Mendes. Hello, Laksari, good to have you with us. A former ambassador to Austria. Then we have the chairman of the Board of Investment of Sri Lanka, Mr. Sanjay Mohtala. Then the CEO of Colombo Stock Exchange, and you remember that the Colombo Stock Exchange are co-organizers of the event with ICC Sri Lanka. So its CEO, Mr. Rajiva Das Bandaranayake. Welcome, Rajiva. Then the Consul General in Sydney, in Australia, is Mr. Lakshman Hulugalla. Then another dear friend of Sri Lanka, yes, indeed, Dr. Jürgen Morhat, who currently now is the Consul General in Mumbai in India, but until 2017, he was here in Sri Lanka as the ambassador for Germany, and we do recognize his contribution, much work that was done during his tenure here. Then we have the first secretary to the Economic and, first secretary, Economic and Commercial, serving the Indian High Commission in Sri Lanka, Dr. Rakesh Pandey, and last and certainly not least, the Economic and Commercial Counselor to the Embassy of China in Sri Lanka, Mr. Lee Guangjung. So that's our panel. And now I'd like to hand over proceedings to the first of our moderators, Buddhi Atauda. Buddhi, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very honored to be with all of you today. I can see lots of familiar faces, and being an ambassador one time and coming on to the other side and asking a few questions and having a dialogue with the current ambassadors is really a privilege for me. And I think today, this evening, I want to start with our former Foreign Minister, Mr. Rohitha Bogollagama. So during your, when you were the Foreign Minister, during the conflict days, there were a few countries ganging up against Sri Lanka. And you really had to drive Sri Lanka's foreign agenda, foreign policy agenda, with a super efficient and a very polite yet stern way. And you have done a wonderful job, and still Western diplomats are talking about you. Could you just expand on that topic for us? Can everybody hear you? Can you unmute your microphone? Mr. Bogollagama, your microphone is muted.
Is it okay now?
Now it's okay. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Buddhi, for your kind words. And I'm delighted to be associated with my colleagues as well as friends around. And I think we had a good start on this webinar coming from Bob Lake, who was served during the very critical period over in Colombo. And I think it's maybe out of the subject that we are meant to talk today, that you pose this question as to how we fared during the most critical period in confronting separatism, terrorism, equally countering all those measures, and how we work with the international community. I think that was an effort largely by good teamwork coming from all ambassadors who were associated in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and along with the respective government agencies who were handling the same task, including the defense establishment, the president, the cabinet of ministers, and we were virtually the ones who mattered in terms of the diplomatic connectivity to the world at large. In doing that task, I have got my friend, Dr. Palthakona, already associated in this webinar. He may be able to expand on some of the things that I may share with you, but largely asking a very pertinent question coming from you, how we manage it was through public diplomacy. Our ambassadors continuously kept on engaging in the respective capitals, both with the ones who were negative towards us as much as with the ones who were positive towards us. And we were able to balance it all. And our reactions were more in terms of substantiated effort rather than rhetoric behavior on our part. We were able to substantiate every word, and credibility was there associated with us when we went and spoke on some whatever matter that concerns the international community. I think the cooperation that we received from the United Nations and its bodies, the bilateral relations that grew between us and India, along with the other countries, including US, China, and the rest of the world, I think stood very well during my period, and I think I will attribute whatever successes we had to the joint efforts made by our diplomats who were serving in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I think the credit should go to them to have lifted country up at the most critical period of Sri Lanka's history, and the compliments to the colleagues in the Foreign Ministry. I think that's how I look at it. Yes, Buddhi.
Yes, I think, as you said, I think you build consensus all around the world with your, I should call the soldiers, the ambassadors that you had at that time. And let me move to Dr. Kohona then. He was, at that time, I think he was the Foreign Secretary of the Foreign Ministry at that time. And I'm going to change the subject a little bit to a different subject now for Dr. Kohona. Even though you're the Sri Lanka ambassador in China, let me ask you about your other passionate subject, that is the renewable energy and electric mobility. And as a diplomat and the modern day economic diplomacy, what would you do to drive this agenda and also to expedite adaptation of the renewable energy and electric mobility? Dr. Kohona. Your mic is muted, Dr. Kohona. Can you? Not yet. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Buddhi. It's a pleasure to be in this panel today with my old friends, Crispin Conroy, Dr. Robert Blake, Minister Rohitha Bogollagama, and a whole range of others, Saroja Sirisena, Laksari Mendis, etc., etc. Well, in response to your question, we know that the globe is facing a huge problem at the moment. Greenhouse gases, gas levels are still growing. The globe is warming, and we are not heading in the right direction when it comes to working out our own survival as a human race. Sri Lanka, for its part, has made a policy commitment that we will produce 70% of our energy from renewables by the year 2030. But to my utter surprise, I find that this policy commitment of the government on which the population voted has been contradicted today by the engineers of the CEB. I find that utterly outrageous. And then again, looking at the rest of the world, China will peak its greenhouse gas emissions in 2030 and will become carbon neutral by 2060. The United States has said that it will become carbon neutral by 2050. The European Union is heading in the same direction. So I think it is very important that Sri Lanka look at the rest of the world and take its cues from the rest of the world, because this is absolutely important for our survival as a human race. And what do we do about it in Sri Lanka? We should emphasize renewable energy. We should step away from producing our energy using fossil fuels. China has said categorically that it will not fund fossil fuel-based energy production in the future. It will not provide funding for other countries to produce energy using fossil fuels. So if we are to follow the dominant trend in the world, we also should head in the same direction. It's very important to do that. And it's not as if it's going to be difficult for Sri Lanka, because we are only 6 degrees to the north of the equator. We get something like 300 days of sunshine in a year. Countries like Japan, Germany, which get something around 200 days of sunshine, are already using solar energy to a significant part of their energy needs. So for Sri Lanka, it's an obvious thing. We could use the sun for our energy needs. The wind power possibility is also there. Sri Lanka can use wind power. There are 2 areas of Sri Lanka which have been identified by UNEP as being very good for the production of wind power, the southern end and Mana part, northwestern part of Sri Lanka. So everything suggests that we can use renewable energy, and we can be in line with the rest of the world, the major economies of the world. And we should.
That's right. I think, Dr. Kona, Sri Lanka can look at this industry for extra foreign currency as well as new job creation, right, Dr. Kona? And
extra foreign currency, if we can encourage. I mean, there is a suggestion that we can export energy to southern India. But that is something for the future. Just at the moment, we need.
Thank you, Dr. Kona. Thank you so much. Yeah.
For our own needs. And then, of course, we can produce solar panels, and there are Chinese companies which have been making inquiries about the possibility of producing solar panels. Sri Lanka is also very well endowed with silica, which is now a major component of solar panels. So it could generate jobs, generate foreign exchange. Yes, that's possible. And we can save on foreign exchange currently being expended on the importation of coal and oil.
Thank you, Dr. Kona. Thank you. I think we are going to squeeze in all the distinguished guests we have in this limited time I have. And now I want to ask a question from Ambassador Crispin Conroy. And you have worked in the multilateral aspect, but do you know this multilateral old animals we have? Some agencies are quite old, they're functioning in a very old way. And now there's a new world. The new world is coming faster than we can think. So Ambassador Conroy, could you share with me some of your thoughts about how to reform WTO to better match, better suited for our new world and the economic diplomacy point of view also, of course. It's about WTO.
Thank you very much again for letting me participate in this event, and also for that question, but I could speak for hours on that topic. It's one of the special areas of focus of the ICC office in Geneva, but also my colleagues in headquarters in Paris. But before I do give you a brief response, let me say special greetings to my old dear friend, Ambassador Dr. Gohan. Palit, it's great to see you after so many years. Lovely to see you. Yeah, look, I'll give the answer, Buddhi, from the perspective of the private sector of ICC. There are a whole range of issues that we could talk about in relation to WTO reform, particularly from a government perspective. But from the business perspective, really, our main concern is that the organization is not functioning effectively. Without going into too much detail, WTO has 3 main pillars: the rule making, the monitoring, and then the judicial. None of those are working effectively. And from business's perspective, an organization like the WTO, which creates international commercial rules, which businesses with the end users of those rules, we need to see an organization that's functioning effectively and developing rules that are relevant for 21st century economies and for business, as I said, as end users. So in summary, we want to see the organization producing rules, relevant rules, and doing it in a more agile and effective manner. Just to let you know, there are a few initiatives that are taking place around e-commerce, for example, developing international rules on e-commerce. And we believe ICC's network, which is global, so we represent big, small, and medium-sized businesses all around the world, having certainty and open rules on e-commerce can benefit business, big and small, wherever it is in the world. That's one example. There's also another initiative on small to medium-sized enterprises, which is already coming up with some useful recommendations, and another initiative on investment facilitation for development, which is relevant to our topic today. So, we want to see an organization that reflects the needs of the modern world and is developing rules for businesses the world over.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I think the reforms, I wish you great success with your lobbying and efforts to reform some of these agencies. And now I will go to our former iconic diplomats, former Ambassador Gohan Gunawardena. He was also the Foreign Secretary. And so, Mr. Gunawardena, what are your recommendations to train young diplomats for the next century, especially with the focus of economic diplomacy? What are your recommendations for the new governments and foreign ministry officials to train your young diplomats? Can you unmute your microphone, Mr. Gunawardena?
Good to see you, and happy to join this program. The responsibility of the foreign missions is basically to promote trade, investment, tourism, taking care of the welfare of the Sri Lankans residing in receiving countries like the Middle East or Gulf, promoting culture for better understanding, trying to safeguard national interest in areas such as trade-related matters, for example, GSP plus issues, securing support for events like the Human Rights Council, what we face every year, taking care of national security, which is a responsibility, another important responsibility. Now, these responsibilities are quite wide, and a university graduate who enters or joins the foreign service will not be equipped or ready to undertake these responsibilities unless otherwise he or she is provided with the requisite training. So it is an important task that the ministry should undertake. These kind of trainings are being done within Sri Lanka. And also there used to be a time when we used to send our new recruits to foreign countries for training. So the most important factor is to equip our training institutions to enable these diplomats, young diplomats, to take on these responsibilities. That is not be done only at the entry level, but also at mid-level, because the responsibilities they have to shoulder will change from time to time, depending on the needs of the country and developments taking place in various parts of the world. So it is very important that the government or the foreign ministry should place high value of training and retraining. Of course, we have certain institutions available, and we have to ask the question whether these institutions are properly equipped, properly staffed, and properly financed. If these things are not there, then of course we will not be in a position to meet the challenges that our young diplomats will have to face during their career. So it is an important responsibility,
right,
and the ministry has an important role to play in that.
Thank you, Mr. Gunawardena. And now I want to go to our High Commissioner, Saroja Sirisena. But before that, I want to ask one more question from Minister Bogollagama quickly. Minister Bogollagama, I think the lobbying, government lobbying power, like Israel is doing a great job in USA. But do you think developing countries also have a separate arm or focus on lobbying other governments and global institutions in a much more stronger and with more focus? mute. Can you unmute your microphone, Mr. Bogollagama? Unmute Karande. Cannot hear you, Mr. Bogollagama. All right. I think we have audio problem with Mr. Bogollagama's one. I will quickly go to High Commissioner Saroja Sirisena, and then we'll come back to the Minister. High Commissioner Sirisena, you are an amazing personality. I also got to know you for a long time now. You can walk into a place and make your presence very clearly, and you have elegance and you have excellent social skills. But the role of a High Commissioner also give you lots of credibility and more power than any individual can hold of our own great qualities. So how do you use your given credibility and extra power to bring trade and economic benefits to your country, your motherland? That's one question, okay? And then we'll talk about what you can do with also during our pandemic, what you have done for our country, okay?
Thank you, Ambassador Buddhi. Ayubowan, everybody. I think we are in different time zones, so Ayubowan is perhaps the best form of greeting. I'm indeed honored to be on this panel this morning in the UK with such distinguished participants, the former minister who I had the privilege to serve under during his tenure as former foreign secretary, two former foreign secretaries, current ambassadors, and my dear colleagues. Thank you. I think, Buddhi, you'd give me a little too much credit, but I think we all we have the backing of our country, and when we walk into an arena, we are carrying our flag, and that is the power that we have, and that is the pride that with which we carry that. And given that we are actually representing a very good story, a good country with a lot of potential that perhaps hasn't been sufficiently showcased because of certain impediments. For example, 30 years of conflict, terrorist conflict, which has perhaps now been portrayed in a very different context. So these are some of the challenges, and despite that, we are actually marketing a great product, an undersold product. So I think that is the strength that I personally have in promoting Sri Lanka, in representing Sri Lanka. When we have a good product to market, I think that is an inherent strength. We are a country that has had free education, free healthcare for over 7 decades. I mean, this is something countries with far greater resources than ours are unable to boast of. And this is not a result that you can achieve over a spending of a year or two. This is an investment of decades, of generations, and this is an investment in our human resources. So with what we have as a product, Sri Lanka, I think is an extremely strong product to market. So I think I have responded to what you've asked. Social skills come with that when you have a great product to market.
Thank you, Ambassador Saroja Sirisena. And now I want to quickly finish Minister Bogollagama about lobbying.
Yes, I think the strategy would be that we employed. You yourself was in the service during my time. And I think the collective effort given in the capitals that mattered to us and the UN system overall, we were really battling off terrorism back in Sri Lanka. Simultaneously, we had battlegrounds getting created overseas in Europe, in the European Union, in UK, maybe in Washington, and also in New York on a continuous basis. how did we manage to engage with them? Now, that is our, I take it, the strength that we displayed came in terms of the skill diplomacy that was available to us in terms of engagement. We needn't engage singularly, but we engage collectively. In doing so, our strategy was, if it was Washington, engage both with White House, with the establishments of defense, along with the Congress. And the Congress had divided. And in that sense, we were able to visit the senators, work with the Senate aides, and build up confidence where our missions will get accepted in terms of credibility and a strong message as to what we are doing back in Sri Lanka. In the UN system too, that was the employment that we did. In getting the UN personnel visiting Sri Lanka briefed well, at the same time making it open in terms of witnesses to whatever we are doing. In the European Union too, continuously we were engaging with the European Union in the capitals in Europe and also in the UK, where the lobbies were becoming sometimes not too favorable to us, but constant engagement and communication mattered a lot. So I think that is how the strategy that we employed did well, and we were able to come out at the end of the war. In terms of maybe another development has taken place on various other fronts like reconciliation and accountability, etc. But overall, we were able to win the war that mattered to us more than anything else. And now we are on a new footing because we can share those experiences in terms of building the economic gains for this country. And the agenda that must be set from the headquarters to our given missions, number 58 and consuls and others who are representing Sri Lanka, can do a fairly important role in continuing this process on engagement, as some of the ambassadors expressed, and continuously maintaining our credibility in the given capitals. I think that is the key to our economic diplomacy, and to see that investment flows are getting generated, irrespective of whatever the rate is that may get in terms of international standards, maybe in a temporary situation like that of the COVID scenario that we are all experiencing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bogollagama. And I want to go to Dr. Gohan for another question, but before that one, let me come to His Excellency Riaz Hamidullah, our the ambassador of Bangladesh in the Netherlands. The question is this: European countries tend to do trade with among their friends, neighbors, UK, France, Germany, Italy, else. They don't go outside much. They want AAA rated economies to deal with, but they are a little. So you, having experience in the EU region and also in the SAARC Secretariat, how would you or what are your recommendations, or how can we bring Europeans to do more business in the SAARC region?
Thank you. It's been 1 year that I left Sri Lanka, and I'm right now in Europe. Many think that Netherlands is a small country, small quote unquote, but let me tell you, it's the 16th largest economy Why I say this, because being here, I see three things now coming, and I think that would respond to what you are asking. First of all, three things are going to determine not only the way Bangladesh or Sri Lanka does business or engage economically with the West, including Europe. One is that sustainability, circularity, and carbon neutrality / net zero. These are converging together. 2030, 2050, that's one. Secondly, the systems are transforming. Systems mean agro-food, energy, transport, logistics, manufacturing. Why I say this? Because sometimes we either don't understand, don't regard, or we try to sort of ignore those. And thirdly, connecting Geneva, Paris, Brussels. I, for one, would see that the norms, standards, practices are on a roll, literally. Now, when you say this, and when I receive inquiries from either my friends in Bangladesh and say that, can I export this, etc., I see that the engagement from Korea, Japan, China, or even India and others vis-a-vis Bangladesh, investment in Bangladesh, engaging economically with Bangladesh is one. With Europe and the West, it's different. So it's not a monolith. Let's understand that. In Europe, they value values. They have a different way of set of questions, different way of assessing risk. Sometimes we may not understand, and we tend to, let's say, those in business often ask that, why are they asking this? I think that's not the way to go about. Europeans want to engage with certain degree of comfort, transparency, and sometimes that may mean that things on the ground may not be something that I may be feeling comfortable about, but engaging with them in trust, transparency, and frankness, I think, is the way forward. So that would be my take in terms of responding to what you're saying. So understanding the other side's expectations and the language is very important.
Thank you. And now I want to go back to Dr. Kohona for a bit of a controversial question, Dr. Kohona. You know, Dr. Kohona, in Sri Lanka and some other countries, they are very concerned that Sri Lanka is over-depending on China and Chinese economy and the power of money. But on the other hand, especially the private sector. But on the other hand, when I was in Europe as an ambassador, I noticed some of the Western companies, if Sri Lanka is a preferred partner of China, those European companies like to come and invest. I think there is some kind of economic movement happening. So what are your thoughts on these concerns that Sri Lanka companies and have about over-dependence on China? Dr. Kohona, your mic is muted. Thank you.
I believe that this perception is erroneous. In fact, it's not based on fact. Sri Lanka is not over-dependent on China. Sri Lanka has consistently called on other companies from other countries to come in and make use of the Colombo port city, the industrial zone, the Eraur textile park, etc. We have invited the whole world to come and invest in Sri Lanka. It just so happens that at the moment, the interest in Sri Lanka is mainly Chinese companies. So to say that Sri Lanka is over-dependent on China is, I think, an exaggeration and an oversimplification. For our part, we would love to see companies from Europe, from America, Australia, India, coming and investing in Sri Lanka. And we are constantly pushing that line. We are encouraging them to come in here. Unfortunately, these companies don't seem to be too inclined to come to Sri Lanka at the moment. And then, of course, we get criticized when the Chinese come here. The opportunities, business opportunities in Sri Lanka to me, are obvious. Sri Lanka is in the middle of the Indian Ocean, next to India, a booming marketplace, not at the moment, but it will be. Very, very close to Africa, the Middle East, ASEAN, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Australia. We are also the hub, one of the hubs of the Southern Silk Route. So this is a place where companies can very comfortably come and invest and benefit from it. But the Chinese are here. And also let me remind you one thing. Chinese investments mainly up to now have gone to the United States. The Chinese have invested over $145 billion in the United States. Does anybody criticize that? No. Sri Lanka gets criticized for attracting a much smaller amount of investments from China. Europe has received close to 100 billion euros from China, Chinese investors.
Thank you.
So let us get everything into perspective. We need the investors. Our economy needs to grow. And if the Chinese are the only ones willing to come here and take the risk of investing here, I think the others should match that or simply put up with it.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Gohan. We are trying to rush and finish all our guests. So let me move to our High Commissioner in Singapore for Sri Lanka, Her Excellency Shashikala Premawardena. Greetings to you from Colombo. And my question to you is about this digital world, about cybersecurity and the internet and so on. You as the Sri Lanka ambassador as well as senior diplomat now with experience, global multilateral agencies should have or should have some support for countries on cybersecurity, and the UN agencies should play some more helpful role to the rest of the world. So what are your thoughts on cybersecurity and independent, the internet, and the role of UN and the multilateral agencies?
Thank you very much, Ambassador Budiata, for the question, and thank you. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you to the ICC, Sri Lanka, for the invitation extended. Well, my response to that would be that particularly vulnerable countries who are vulnerable to cybersecurity attacks need to really focus on investing in upgrading their cybersecurity networks, and also there are processes that
ways. And I think the way that one piece of the ecosystem. So embassies are there, the chambers, the ministries, the companies are already here and promote Sri Lanka in terms of outward way. So I would say there are multiple roles an embassy can play. And in my expectation, I would say the first thing starts with the top of the mind awareness. And I think that is something missing for a small country like Sri Lanka. So that is broader overseas outreach or overseas placement, so that the mindset, people realize, okay, there's an island called Sri Lanka. There's a lot of opportunities. We are, as Dr. Palitha talked about, we're an epicenter with 3.5 billion people who are just going through medium affluent countries. There's so much growth, and it's a trade epicenter. It's becoming a commercial epicenter, so we should think about that, right? And then you need to think about going to specific placements as well, right? So then it is about the business entities, the companies in your respective countries, the trade ministries. And it's not just about going and say, hey, Sri Lanka is great, come and invest, but also take the success story. So when you hear about a success story of a company who invested in Sri Lanka and has done well, that's when the others follow, because a lot of others who don't know about Sri Lanka would otherwise be hesitant. The second part of it, my main expectation, networks. And one of the speakers also brought this up. Many times I see these networks sometimes do not really necessarily transfer over when the missions changes or the commercial activities changes. So we need to really think about how do you continue do that, really managing like a CRM in a way of managing these relationships. Thirdly, I would say the sub point on that would be leveraging our honorary council network and our diaspora. Because these are two entities or set of people that give direct access to companies and can even at a lower level lobby up to the senior CEO levels to put their Sri Lanka into their awareness point and then push them into consideration when they're looking at an overseas investment. That's very critical. We manage these two more effectively and very closely. And I think the third part of it is it's both ways, right? It's inward investments coming in, but also for our exporters and especially a country like Sri Lanka, where we really need to grow our SME, small medium enterprise, in terms of their outreach to the countries. Embassies can play a huge role in terms of creating that market access, creating that market status, creating that business partnership or linkage creation. So I think that's something that I would also expect in terms of driving that. And I think the last part of it is a team effort, right? So BOI is one part, the foreign ministry is another part, the trade ministry in Sri Lanka, the foreign missions, the chambers in the respective countries on both Sri Lanka and as well as in the countries, your respective country, all has to come in together and gel to be able to achieve this vision. So I think it's not about just having a coherent story, but all comes down to the execution and having an execution where everyone plays the role to get the investments as well as enable companies to go abroad. So I think that's, I would say in a summary, that's what my expectations would be.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I'm trying to stick to about 3 minutes per guest, so I could squeeze in all these extremely experienced guests we have. And I want to touch law of the sea with Dr. Laksiri Mendis, but before that one, I want to talk to Economic and Commercial Counselor of the Embassy of the Republic of China to Sri Lanka, Mr. Lee Guanjun. And question China's Road and Belt Initiative. It's for some people, it's a very controversial initiative, but it also could be an opportunity for economic diplomacy. Could you expand on that?
Well, thank you very much. And I'm very glad that I'm one of the two or several diplomats from other countries. And I'd like to say that I've been here for just a few months. And after my arrival, I haven't been to, travel outside much because of the pandemic situation. Well, as the question raised here is that we understand that the economic diplomacy and is always positive.
Recording stopped.
Is always positive correlative to trade and investment. That we would like to approach open and inclusiveness rather than
recording
isolation
in progress.
And discrimination. As you said, the China initiated the BRI since 2013, after about 8 years
Recording
of
stopped.
cooperation with other countries along the Belt Road Initiative. Up to now, there are about 30 international organizations and 139 countries have established cooperative mechanism with China under the BRI initiative. So we, in the Chinese way, that the BRI actually promotes the principle of extensive consultation, joint contribution, and shared benefit under the ideology of win-win cooperation. And we would like to build an open international structure, economic structure. After the years, the Chinese initiative of Belt and Road have achieved a lot of results, and which have created tremendous opportunities
expert in the Caribbean region also. So my question to you, Dr. Laksari Mendes, Sri Lanka, we have been trying to expand the economic zone in the ocean to an extra 600 mile radius of area in the ocean. But I think it's taking longer than it's taking longer than we thought it should be getting done. So what are your thoughts? What's your advice to the Sri Lanka government? And how can we get these things done and have our additional economic extra zone in the Indian Ocean that belongs to Sri Lanka legally, and where we get consent from the UN agencies?
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. my question relates to the law of the sea, and we all know that we played a dominant role in the. And although we changed from a mare liberum to mare clausum, that is from limited access, limited sea, from freedom of the seas, we have not made use of our sovereign rights in the exclusive economic zone. Not even that, we have not used our area for shipping industries because we have plenty of opportunity for ship repairs, deballasting, and various things, providing facilities in ships that pass by. We had an idea in 1982 when offshore companies were established in this country. I can still remember Mr. Lalit Atutunath Mudali saying that we should have a lot of seafarers, but none of those companies came to Sri Lanka to establish offshore shipping companies. Now that we have passed a law recently, the Port City Act, with offshore facilities, offshore companies, I hope something will be done without much talk. We must develop these institutional structures, not always talk about the law of the sea, but put our legislation like Marine Pollution Act, which I find hopelessly wrong. It does not follow the models that have been set out by the IMO, or Merchant Shipping Act, which does not give effect to any of the directions of the IMO. So which is not the way to handle our domain, sea domain, maritime domain. And it is very sad when I look, and I worked in the Caribbean, they have developed their structures, institutions, and they don't have the facility like us to do such business. They have registered more than 300, 600 companies in Panama. For instance, I went to Panama and I saw how it has been done, and I met over 50 Sri Lankans as seafarers. They were glad to see me in that place. So I think we have a long, long way to go to develop our resources relating to the sea. We only talk, but we don't go beyond the talk. That is my answer.
Thank you.
Expand further on this if you wish. I'm limited only to 3 minutes.
Thank you, Dr.
On this, if you wish. I'm limited only to 3 minutes. I will restrict it. This problem is not in our favor at the moment because the bulk oil convention has not been ratified and given effect to. So the limited liability will come into play.
Thank you, Dr.
I feel we are a long way off the intended mark. Thank you very much for asking this question.
Thank you. I think your comments will refresh our current officials, and maybe they will pull the files out and get that going from next week again. Thank you, Dr. Lakshmi.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we want to give a opportunity for the Colombo Stock Exchange. Before that one, let's talk to our Dr. Rakesh Pandey, First Secretary, Economic and Commercial, Indian High Commission in Sri Lanka. And Dr. Pandey, you know, India is in a really unique position. It's an emerging powerhouse, an emerging economy, and yet they can relate to the developing countries very well. So how are you going to leverage this experience you have in both worlds? In other words, all the big powerful countries respect you and they come to you and they want you access to your markets, yet you also speak the language of developing countries. So you have a you can have a golden hand. You can make things happen for other countries. So what are your thoughts, and what are some of the visionary things that your country can do for the developing world?
Yeah, thank you. I think, I mean, you have put it very nicely. I mean, India, in context of Sri Lanka, I think India can be the bridge. We have often spoken about that. I mean, that connecting the supply chains of Sri Lankan companies and Indian companies. As you mentioned, I mean, there is a huge market growing right next door. And I think it can be mutually beneficial. I mean, good for both countries if our companies can work together. Now, something like the role of the private sector in this is very, very important. So here at the embassy, I mean, we try very hard to make sure that there is a information bridge between these two countries. I mean, that both sides are aware of the opportunities here in Sri Lanka and in India. And then they can take it forward. I mean, as you mentioned, connecting with the rest of the world. I mean, connecting with the developing world or with promising and emerging markets nearby. So our effort always has been to find ways to work with Sri Lanka, especially in areas where we see that both have complementary strengths. And in this, I see our companies being very interested. I mean, you saw HCL coming here last year. LIOC has been here for a long time. It is setting up a grease plant, which will meet all of Sri Lanka's domestic requirements. I think they're going to launch it very soon. So, I mean, I'm just pointing out these instances where our companies are doing very well. And similarly, I mean, your company is doing quite well in India. So that understanding, I mean, probably due to the proximity, cultural similarity, so many complementary things. So we feel that we are perhaps one of the best placed countries to further develop our trade and economic relationship with Sri Lanka. And also perhaps, I mean, take it to the rest of the world, as you said. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. And so actually, before we give the time slot for the Colombo Stock Exchange, let's go to Australia, Mr. Lakshman Hulugal. And can you tell me utilizing a diaspora to benefit economically and every other possible way? And what are your strategies and what are your thoughts on that, Mr. Hulugal? Good to see you.
Thank you, Buddhi. Well, I'm sitting in the financial capital of Australia. And as you said, the diaspora is also very powerful in that city. But we have last 1 year during pandemic time, I have taken over. We have handled both the parties very well. In fact, the business council that I have formed, we were to launch in this month, but unfortunately because of the block, I couldn't launch the business council, but there are about more than 40 to 50 Australian investors are now ready to come into Sri Lanka and invest. Out of that, at least few will visit Sri Lanka once the borders are open. With the question of diaspora, I think I was able to handle, I think Honorable Minister Rohitha Bogollagama knows about him, especially Mr. Hugh McDermott, who have been very supportive of LTT, and he has refused to meet many consul generals of Sri Lanka, even for a discussion. But I was able to manage to speak to him, meet him. Not that I was able to convince him truly, but I was able to manage him of going and participate in the last Ranaviru Mahaviru function on the 16th of May. So that shows that we have been successful on the issue. but it doesn't affect the investors coming into Sri Lanka. And with the opening of Colombo port city, there are so many investors who have shown interest of coming in. But unfortunately, the Australian law has, especially for their citizens, they are not allowing any of the Australians to visit any country. I am unable to bring a delegation. If not by now, I should have brought a delegation. So I don't see that the diaspora is anyway today is powerful as what it was. And I'm very much delighted to see Mr. Rohitha Bogollagama and Dr. Palitha Kohana, who have worked with me, because when I was in the Ministry of Defense, I worked very closely with Dr. Palitha Kohana and Honorable Minister on the media section. Thank you, Buddhi.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Now, I think this time slot is for Colombo Stock Exchange, Mr. Rajiva Bandaranaike. Actually, it's a quite a broad question for you. What are your expectations from the ambassadors and foreign missions, Sri Lanka missions, and also to support you and Colombo Stock Exchange? And also, can you give me a little pitch on your initiatives and what ambassadors can do for you also? Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity, Ambassador Athauda. If you look at the stock market from the early 1990s, foreigners have been a mainstay and have contributed something between 30 to 50% of volumes. Bulk of the foreign investors have come in from Europe, UK, US, etc. And we are continuing to see interest on the part of foreign investors investing, I think not only in portfolio in listed companies, but into foreign direct investments as well, into certain projects and into companies. So what we would expect from our embassies, and we have been in fact recently engaging with a number of embassies on promoting the potential of Sri Lanka. And we have on one hand local foreign institutional investors, and we also have the diaspora. So we have, I think, a very good opportunity to showcase Sri Lanka by working through the embassies, because I think the Sri Lankan embassies can play a good role in promoting both our foreign direct and portfolio investment. We in fact had a fairly large and first of its kind virtual investor forum as well, where we showcased the potential of Sri Lanka, and I think we extensively marketed it through some of the embassies. So I think to answer your question, Sri Lankan embassies are very well placed. One thing is to communicate the potential of our markets to overseas investors, and secondly also to connect investors, companies with their local counterparts here, with our markets, with our investors, and with our companies. So I think embassies can play a good role, and we are looking forward to a continuous engagement with the embassies, with their commercial attaches, so that we can create that level of awareness of what the potential is, what are the attractive features in Sri Lanka, what is the landscape, the investment landscape, for example, the processes, etc. And also to help embassies to in turn communicate and organize events jointly with both BO and CSC. So that's our expectation.
Thank you so much. And I think if you could explain to me a little bit more about the tax benefits for foreign investors and currency safety features, it would be nice. Could you take a moment?
Yes, I think Sri Lanka is considered what we call a niche frontier market. So it offers opportunity for those who have appetite for growth companies and look at investment long term. So if they're worried about the exchange rate, I think that's to somewhat diluted if they take a longer term view. If you look at the tax, there is total tax exemption. There is no stamp duty. There are no capital gains on any investments that have been made. There is no tax on dividends. Then we have a very well established system of over 30 years of convenient market access with ease of entry and exit for foreign investors, which are serviced by international banks, and the ease of repatriating gains of foreign investors. So you can, through a commercial bank, bring in funds and take back all the funds by dealing only with your bank or transacting with your bank, and take out all of the gains and dividends also on your investment. So you don't need additional approvals. You don't need to go to central bank, etc. So the ease of entry and exit is given. And maybe a good point also to mention that in the last 2 years, we have seen an increase in liquidity, which will be attractive for foreign investors. For example, for any given day, currently, we do something like $20 million a day in terms of turnover. Last year, it was about 10 million. So we have had a significant growth in the liquidity, which will make the market attractive in sense for foreigners to get in and get out as well. So in a nutshell, those are some of the tax areas that we have for you. And just to also comment that if you look at corporate profits and the market performance, corporate profits for the last 2 quarters, the last quarter of 2020 and the first quarter of 2021 has been at a record high. It has been a record. So I think the companies offer attractive value for any foreign investors. So there is a lot that we can talk about in terms of the potential and attractiveness for investors.
Right. Thank you. I think you have been a great knowledge house here today. ICC webinar on role of embassies and consulates in promoting exports and investments. And I think each one of you could spend hours talking about these subjects because you know so much, and then there's so much to explain or talk about. But unfortunately, we're out of time. And I want to thank all of you one more time. And I also want to take this opportunity to commend Dinesh Virakudi and Nisar Kasim for putting this together and with ICC. And I want to invite Arun Das Bandaranaike for your next comment. Thank you, Arun.
Thank you, Buddhi. Thank you very much for taking us through that initial session as moderator. And you certainly covered a lot of ground and different directions, as they say, battered around the wicket. Or maybe those that you did ask questions of did that. Now, we'd like to bring on the next of our moderators. That's the editor-in-chief of the Daily FT, Nisar Kasim, and he will take the conversation on a little further along. And we are also receiving questions and queries from those that are tuned in or listening in on the FB accounts, the Facebook accounts. So finally, after Nisar does his round, we will invite Dinesh Virakudi to do the final numbers. Now, let me hand over to Nisar Kasim. Nisar.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Arun. I know it's a big panel. I've got about 20 to 30 minutes but I'm not going to go panelist by panelist, but I'll throw some general questions. And I expect all of our ambassadors and honorary consuls to respond to it. I have 3 questions actually. So first question is, I'm expecting specific answers from Saroja, maybe Shashikala, Dr. Kohana, and also Mr. Hurugal. Government is sort of betting a lot on a quick tourism industry revival, plans to, because of the need to boost foreign exchange. I want each of the country reps to tell as to how this could be done, and how confident are you that tourists will return to Sri Lanka, particularly we remain in the red list in some of the destinations. Maybe we start from Saroja and then move on to Sashi and maybe Lakshman and Dr. Kona.
Thank you, Nista. On tourism, we are obviously on the red list, but I just want to highlight a little bit about our trade figures, because 2020 we actually outperformed the EDP target by $100 million. So that was a very good result for Sri Lankan exports. The trade, because the UK is our second largest trading partner, so in terms of exports, and second largest export destination. So we actually, our trade was in excess of $1 billion. On the tourism front, the UK is our second or third, some years depends on which year it is, source of inbound tourists. Unfortunately, since 2019, since the Easter Sunday terror attacks, these figures have not performed to the best. But we are confident with Sri Lanka's vaccine drive forging ahead, and that we should see positive results towards perhaps the end of the third quarter or perhaps at the beginning of the fourth quarter of this year. So we are engaging with our UK counterparts in disseminating the information, how things are performing in Sri Lanka. And another factor I think that we need to consider, shall be very brief, is that in the new normal, we need to look at countries' the nature of travel will change, and I believe that people will look at more, sort of longer travel, longer holidays as opposed to shorter, brief holidays. So I think in that sense, Sri Lanka has an advantage. And on the other hand, they also need to have good infrastructure, good facilities for healthcare. And I think, again, in our price category, Sri Lanka outperforms our competitors in terms of offering good healthcare and good infrastructure, good road network, where no part of the country is unconnected to a medical facility. So these are some of the factors that we have an edge over the others. So in the pandemic, very briefly, that we have actually engaged through social media platforms and, when possible, face-to-face meetings to promote what Sri Lanka has to offer. And we have seen a number of new products come in the sort of the post-pandemic or pandemic-related industries. Ayurveda, rubber products have actually been coming into the forefront because with people's focus on wellness, Ayurvedic products, herbal teas have increased because our apparel took a hit in the UK. But this was compensated by other products coming in to fill the market. PPE, rubber products, and Ayurveda are amongst them. And again, with the utilization of the digital platforms, we have seen an increase in the BPM, KPM sectors. So that's in a nutshell. Thank you, Mr.
Yeah, thanks, Aroja. Thanks for combining the trade as well as investments into the answer. Sashikala, I know we are also in the red list with regard to Singapore. What are the prospects? I know you had a webinar recently as well in terms of positioning Sri Lanka as a hub. I'm just looking at how much of tourism can we draw, and also perhaps respond in terms of trade and investments as well.
Thank you very much, Lisa, for that question. Actually, we've been doing a lot of promotion, trade, and tourism, despite the fact that with the pandemic, we've had some issues with regard to borders closing. Yes, we are still on the restricted list, but we are in conversation with the government of Singapore on reciprocal vaccination certification recognition. That conversation has been taking place over the past 6 months, and we're hopeful that once Sri Lanka's vaccination drive also is successful and is concluded, we will be able to really open up to Singapore, and Singaporeans are really looking forward to a closer destination. I think where we differ in the case of UK is that Singaporeans look for a shorter time period of stay. So we have to target maybe a week at the maximum for tourists to stay in Sri Lanka. But throughout the pandemic period, what we've done is we've reached out to the World Travel Magazine Singapore. We've reached out to CNA, so we've been featured on CNA, we've been featured on World Travel Magazine, the Yala National Park, the eco resorts have been featured, continue to be featured, because our purpose has been to keep Sri Lanka in the minds of Singaporeans. Traditionally speaking, Singaporeans, there's not much tourism from Singapore to Sri Lanka. Lisa, it's about 20,000 on a best year. So now what we have tried to do is to keep Sri Lanka in the mind's eye of Singaporeans and try to tell them that this is a close destination. It's a safe destination. The health facilities are great. So you can safely travel to Sri Lanka and come back. So our challenge is that there is a longer stay for people when they come back to Sri Lanka, come back to Singapore, which is the stay home notice, of about 14 to 21 days, which I think no one wants to go through. On the trade side, what we've done, I think one of the most significant things that we did is that with Temasek Holdings, MAS Holdings actually produced 10 million face masks for Temasek Holdings. That's one of the first times that an apparel conglomerate has been able to secure a deal. And the High Commission really was very much involved in securing the deal for MAS. And the value of the deal is about $130 million US. So around Singapore, you can see people wearing living guard face masks, which are made in Sri Lanka. So that's one of the aspects of pandemic diplomacy on the trade side. Traditionally, from the trade side, what we've got is about 600 million to 1 billion US dollars worth of trade between the two countries. And that has tended to vacillate over time, and it has been mainly in favor of Singapore. The main thing that I find with Sri Lankan companies, Sri Lankan exporters, is this is not a familiar market to them. Sri Lankan exporters have not been consistent in this market. So what we've done is to put through a series of webinars, Sri Lankan exporters and the importers on this side together in the areas of print, in the areas of kids' toys, in the areas of food and agribusiness, in the areas of digitalization. And we've also done some investment-related seminars as well, which you have watched. Thank you very much for attending. And also as a manufacturer, basically to showcase Sri Lanka as a manufacturing hub. I would say that what we really need to look at is that Singapore is a high net worth market. I mean, it's a small market, but it's a high net worth market. It's a very important market. It's also a consistent market, and it's growing. It's projected to grow. GDP growth rate is supposed to be in 2021 between 4 to 6%, and that's even with the pandemic. So this is a market that Sri Lankan exporters really need to look at more carefully, and we are ready to help out. Please reach out to us. We would be happy to help out. As with regard to investments, Mr. Singapore is the 5th largest investor in Sri Lanka and continues to be so. Over 2019 and 2020, there's been $150 million worth of investments going into Sri Lanka, and we hope to increase that. We've been working with the BOI to do that and showcasing the potential that Sri Lanka has. As my colleagues also put it, it's a uphill task for all of us. But it's not an impossible task. It's just that we need to project Sri Lanka in a way that is attractive to the investors. And we also need to follow through on the promises that we make, particularly to investors as they come in. And I think that is the most important part. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you, Shashikala. Thank you very much. Can I move on to Lakshman? I know Sri Lankans has plans to start flights to Sydney in the next few months. What are the prospects of sort of promoting tourism and, of course, more trade and investment from Australia?
Yeah, Nista, now on a normal days, when the country was normal and before pandemic, 11% of the tourists coming into Sri Lanka was from Australia. Now, unfortunately, because the Australian borders are totally closed by the Australian government, we find the most difficult part. If not, the people of Australia and when I speak to the general public or the investors, they think that Sri Lanka is a safe destination. And especially with the rate of vaccination given to Sri Lankan citizens, they are very happy with the way how it is being controlled. Unfortunately, on the second and the third wave of COVID-19 has ruined our image. But as Shashikala rightly said, it's not an impossible task. I think if we really work out well, the first part of 2022, we'll be able to bring out tourists. Even if we have to start a tourist bubble, we need a protection from Sri Lanka. Unless Sri Lanka has another round of pandemic and Sri Lanka become a red city, so far Sri Lanka is not being considered as a dangerous zone for Australians. So Australian citizens and the investors, and especially when I met the travel agents, they are expecting the Sri Lankan Airways to start direct flight. Already there is a flight last 8 months. There is a flight, cargo flight flying, and we have been able to send a certain number of passengers who are eligible to fly. So we will be able to promote Sri Lanka tourism and also the investment. That's the target given to me when I took over my duties, and I think I'll be able to fulfill that. It's all depend on the rules of Australian government. Thank you.
Thanks, Lakshman. Move on to Dr. Kohana. I know just my questions with regard to investment from you is we see a lot of G2 or state-owned corporations or state-owned entities investing in Sri Lanka. My question is, how could we attract more non-governmental SME type investments into Sri Lanka from China? And of course, China is a huge source market, but there are also restrictions. How confident are you in government plans to reopen and revive tourism very fast? Dr. Kona? Okay. I don't see him on board. Okay. The quick one.
Mr. I think Dr. Kohana is not engaged at the moment. Not engaged with us.
Okay, fine. So another follow-up questions to our Shashikala and Saroj as well as Lakshman just as, how are you managing these policy implications with regard to boosting trade? Because of COVID and reserves issues, we have a lot of controls on imports for the last 2 years. There are lots of, in parallel, there is also import substitution policies happening in Sri Lanka. Government is aggressively promoting import substitution. So in your engagement in trying to promote bilateral trade, this issue must be coming up. How have you all managed this question from the other side of the trade? Saroja, maybe you can start.
Well, in the case of the UK, trade is heavily weighted in our favor. So we are the, in terms of the bulk of the trade, it's coming from our end to the UK. But they do have concerns, especially in the luxury car market and, of course, their beverages and other items. But we have been able to explain that this is for our balance of payments and current reserve issues. So I think for now, we are okay. But at the same time, we have to understand that in order to attract investments, the trade policy has to also be equally liberal. They both go hand in hand. And the other thing is also, we are now at present beneficiaries of the enhanced framework of the UK, which is a replicate of the GSP Plus scheme, which the European Union has for Sri Lanka. So with Brexit, we are now beneficiaries of the enhanced framework. But we are of the view that Sri Lanka needs to deepen the trading engagement beyond unilateral concessions. because unilateral concessions are usually based on non-trade issues, non-trade matters. So we need to make our trading relationship more robust and more even. So I think Sri Lankan, we need to, as a government, also change our mindset and look at more equal partnerships rather than unilateral handouts. So I think that's where we need to go. But I think this difficult period, I believe that they do understand. There is a certain level of understanding that has been extended to us, but it cannot be forever, obviously. Thank you.
Thank you. Both Sashikala and Lakshman can sort of contribute if you have a sort of a comment to say in terms of how challenging it has been given the policies of protectionist policies of Sri Lanka in terms of promoting bilateral trade.
Yeah, bilateral trade, we have a problem, because most of the food commodities have been coming from Australia, and it has been last 6 to 7 months it has been stopped. So there is a concern, but as Saroja said, they do understand the trade policy and the economy of certain countries. This is not only for Sri Lanka. It affects most of the countries. So it is there, but they expect us to lift this ban soon, and the trade in both sides bilateral will be able to start. So I also think that this rule is not going to be permanent. So we have explained about the situation, and once the COVID situation is over or the economy is much more stable, we'll be able to start bilateral trade between the two countries.
Okay, thank you. Sashikala, you had something to say.
I just have to echo what's already been said. I think, we've been explaining to the Singapore side what our constraints have been, and there is a level of understanding that these are temporary measures.
Okay, fine. Thank you. I'd like to move on to the Dr. Rakesh Pandey. We were talking about trade and investments and tourism. I know Sri Lanka has been trying to lobby with India to give access, open up markets, at least few destinations. I know there are some efforts done with government very keen on trying to attract tourism. How far have you all opened up, or you think India is still not going to allow travel going forward in the next 6 months or 3 months?
On travel to India, I don't think there are any restrictions at the moment. I mean, from travel to India, from
I'm talking about from India to, because India is our biggest market in terms of tourism.
Right. So at the moment, I mean, India is in a group of restricted countries from which travel has been restricted.
Yeah.
So there is only 3 or 4 categories of people who can travel, and that too with special approvals. And I mean, 2 or 3 departments are involved. Once you get those approvals, only then Indian nationals, I mean, people with a travel history to India, so they can come into Sri Lanka. So till those remain in effect, I mean, I think that resuming full-scale tourism continues to be a challenge. But as you rightly said, I mean, in 2019, I think the Indian tourists were the largest group of foreign tourists to arrive into Sri Lanka. Sorry, was there another part to your question? Yeah, I mean, we had been working together with the government of Sri Lanka to look at ways to restore connectivity, I mean, and get this linkages restored. But unfortunately, the second wave intervened, and again, I mean, we will be trying our best to make sure that we restore these linkages as early as possible.
Okay, fine, thank you. I'm just trying to involve this question with Rajiv of Colombo Stock Exchange. How far have you all, I know you mentioned about, I'm just talking, maybe this is a facet that both 3 of you all can, Shashikala and Saroj, and in terms of engaging the diaspora to attract investments to the stock exchange, because we have had a 37 billion or 35 billion outflow of foreign investments from Colombo Stock Exchange. And I know in the past, CSE engaged with the diaspora, lots of forums done.
Recording stopped.
What's the appetite in terms of
recording in progress?
Sri Lankan listed companies? I want a quick answer from three of you all and also from Rajiva on that.
Thank you, Nista. We have actually conducted a few awareness programs to our diaspora. We've also relaunched our business council as a business chamber under the British Chamber of Commerce to bring together all the companies that are doing business in Sri Lanka to actually reinforce business confidence in Sri Lanka, because there's nothing that speaks better than actually actual stories of people who are doing business in Sri Lanka. And our diaspora has also helped us in our IT sector. So we've had a referral, we launched the first referral program with SLASCOM. So I think with nearly 500,000 ex-Sri Lankans, British Sri Lankans in the United Kingdom, and well-placed and economically stable British Sri Lankans, this has been a very, very strong group of support for us. And in addition to that, they have also responded very positively for the government program for the special
Recording
deposit,
stopped.
Special deposit accounts.
Recording in progress.
This has also been a method where we have been able to attract more foreign exchange to the country. Thank you.
Thank you. Shashi and Lakshman, what are the prospects of attracting diaspora investments into the Colombo Stock Exchange?
Mr. On the part of Singapore, this Singapore Sri Lanka Business Association is the primary chamber at this end. It's an association really, but we have been engaging with them, and they've really been quite active, particularly in the past 2 years. And we've engaged with Rajiva on a couple of initiatives, I think, to get the message across on the prospects for investments in the markets, in the capital markets. And we are hoping that that will come through pretty soon. We are at the moment debating whether we should go the route of a digital event, or whether we can still look forward to having a physical event sometime during this year. But that would also depend on the vaccination drive, really, and how far we get by September, I would think. So at the moment, what we've done, it's a very small, Sri Lankan expatriates, it's a very small group, but nevertheless, they're professionals with inroads, and apart from which, we also have a lot of interest from the Singapore side in the capital markets as well. And I mean, we've had investment meetings on a regular basis with the Singapore Sri Lanka Business Association, and also with the central bank coming in and the stock exchange coming in, and road shows have been had in Singapore. The only drawback for us has been the closure of borders, really. So we're waiting till at least, hopefully, once things ease up, we will be able to get back on track. But the market is of interest, I think, to Singapore. Thank you.
Thank you. Lakshman, any additions?
Shikala says, our business council, which has about 40 to 50 people, out of that, 4 people have already invested in Sri Lanka. They have a lot of confidence of Sri Lanka business, how it's happening, and they're very confident. And the Australians are very confident over Sri Lanka IT sector. They respect the IT sector. The Sri Lankans are genius. And but unfortunately, there was a complaint at the beginning that when the investors come into Sri Lanka, they are being sent to pillar to post, and they are not being treated in the right way. But this time, when I came to Sri Lanka, I met the Honorable Basil Rajapaksa, the Minister of Finance, and he personally gave me assurance, who is coming as an investor without asking money from Sri Lanka banks, if the investor is bringing foreign exchange, that his ministry will handle, and the investor will be looked after. So that gives a lot of confidence to the person who is coming. I think not only me, even for Shashikala or Saroja or any ambassador, that's a very big compliment for the country, and we'll be able to promote.
Okay, thank you. My last question is before I move on to Dinesh. Last question is try to bring in Sanjay from BOI. This is I'm going to put you in a difficult, not a difficult position, but I'm sure you can be very diplomatic. What do you expect from these high commissioners and representatives of Sri Lanka in some of these major markets? What is BOI expectation from them, given the challenges and the efforts that they have put in so far?
Dennis, I think I covered that earlier also. I think the important thing is these embassies of boots on the ground, right? So I think the embassies play a multiple role. If I would say the first would be actually a country like Sri Lanka, if I were to go back to that same answer, is to put Sri Lanka on the minds of the investors, the companies and all that, right? So I think that is a very critical part. So I'm going to give you a very quick one. The second part of it is the continuity of the business relationships, engaging the diaspora, and also having that targeted investment, both investment outreach for investments into Sri Lanka as well as the exporters to give that platform or create the platform to get into the markets.
Yeah. Sanjay, I just want to tweak the question. How much of your, let's say, for example, on an average, how much of investment inquiries come via or through initiation by the High Commission on the embassies? I mean, do you have any idea?
I think this given the COVID pandemic and all the limitations you have, I would say it's actually on the rise. I think the important thing is to have an able set of ambassadors in the key geographies, and I think that's what we have really done, right? And you have Sasikala, Saroja, Mr. Meaning Palitha, Dr. Palitha, then State Korea, Japan, any other country, right? So then the second part of it is the investment opportunities that creates. And the third part of it is a team effort, right? So results.
Okay, I'm sorry I couldn't connect. Rajiva, are you available to respond
yes,
to that?
of course. Yeah, let me quickly weigh in here. I think, Nisa, given the challenges that we have now presently, in the short term, diaspora looks a very good option to bring in dollars and for foreign investment. And I think in that direction, we have been, in fact, engaging with the UK High Commission, with Singapore High Commission, etc., into trying to communicate this onwards to the diaspora. And we have had roadshows, etc., before in Australia. So I think right now a good strategy would be to address the diaspora, because diaspora would be more willing to understand the issues that Sri Lanka has, maybe more sympathetic towards the problems that we have. And therefore, I think they'll be more willing to invest, particularly those working in the Middle East, etc. So we do have a plan of addressing the diaspora. And in that connection, we have undergone a process of digitization, as you would know, and we are trying to extend that to any foreign individual as well, so that a person can electronically submit all of the documentation required and onboard themselves digitally without having the need to send and courier documents. So I think that will be a step in the right direction in trying to encourage Sri Lankan diaspora to get into the stock market and trade and settle seamlessly. So we are trying to facilitate that through, in fact, the embassies. And we look for the active cooperation. There have been some of the ambassadors on board today have been actually giving very good support. And we would look forward to that support, particularly in extending those facilities for the diaspora to come in and trade in the market.
Okay, thank you. My time slot is gone, so thank you very much, everyone. Sorry I couldn't talk to the other people, but I think Dinesh will engage with the other panelists. Thanks, Saroja, Lakshman, Sanjay, Shashikala, and also Pandey and Rajiva, whom I interacted with in this small session. Thank you very much, and doing excellent work you guys are doing. Excellent. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Thank you.
Thanks, Rista. Well, at this juncture, we would like to bring on Dinesh Veerakodi. He will be bringing over some of the questions that have been flowing in from the FB account. So please stay on and enjoy this final part, which is moderated by Dinesh. Over to Dinesh.
Yeah. Thank you, Arun. I'll keep the questions short as possible, and I also want the answers short. I'll start off with Rohitha. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Dinesh.
Right, Rohitha, my first question is, how do you up the game in terms of competence of the ambassadors?
No, I think their task is unique because they are the first point of contact in a given capital, both to the political establishments as much as to the commercial outfits. So I take it that their role has to be very visible and also highly committed. And their perseverance as much as their credibility has to be intact. So much so that the confidence will get built up. Like right across in the commercial sector, the chambers play a vital role. And chambers means is money talks. And money means they measure out as to how their investments are going to flow from one location to another location. So in that context, you can't just talk and just see that results will come. And the connectivity lies from the embassy back to the BOI or to a given agency where the investor confidence should not be undermined. So that's the first message I can share. Having been a chairman myself of the BOI 25 years ago, there was a track record in terms of Sri Lanka's history in attracting foreign investments. There's nothing new for Sri Lanka to begin with. We have been doing so since the advent of the free economic policies in this country dating back to about 35, 40 years. And we have filled one zone after another with foreign investors coming into this country. So there's nothing new.
Rohit, I'll stop you there.
Yes.
Yeah, Rohit, I'll stop you there and maybe ask Bernard also to come in.
Yes, go ahead.
Bernard, can you hear us? Selection of ambassadors, how do you up the game? Can't hear.
It is an important task for the government or to the ministry to decide who should be sent to which particular mission to perform responsibilities according to the needs of that particular station. I really do not know whether there is a selection process as such, but of course in selecting the ambassadors, due consideration is given to the abilities of the individual, the experience they have gathered, and whether they will be able to perform the task that they expect to do in that particular station. So with that kind of a background, I presume we have good ambassadors in stations which are important to the country, whether it is bilateral or multilateral, and they have so far performed a very important task in promoting the interest of Sri Lanka. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Rohit, my next question is a bit of a political hot potato. The question reads, government is refusing to go to the IMF. The opposition says it is important to engage. What is your advice to the government of Sri Lanka?
What is
you are the best person to respond to this.
Let me look at it in this context. Leaving aside politics, what is needed in Sri Lanka is in order to get more financial assistance in the given situation. Now that IMF is a body of which we are also part of. We are part of the IMF system. We are part of the World Bank. We are part of the UN systems. So we are part of the international community. And we are subscribed to many of these agencies. Having done that in the past, I don't see there is any hard fast rule that we should not engage with the IMF. What is a good reason why we should not engage? Are there any strictures coming on us? Then we have to weigh them. But I take it the current situation lies. We don't want to go on the route of Lebanon, where we will not have anything coming our way. We have to go in terms of a more pragmatic approach in the large interest of country's economy. In doing so, engaging with an international body like that of the IMF, I think stands well in terms of lifting our profile and the very recognition they are going to meet across to us. will meet other agencies as well, other countries as well, respecting Sri Lanka's profile in terms of wider engagement with the international community. So I take it we need the dollars, we need the profile lift up, we need the recognition across the borders. And having said that, I think that opportune time has come for us to weigh the pros and cons without saying no to any of these openings. But the first requirement is, what does the country need at this very moment to tie over the current deficit and also to come out of this current scenario? So I take it the government will be prudent to look at more pragmatically in the larger interest of the country first, and thereby go forward for the next stage of our development agenda.
Thank you. Maybe the next question, Saroja and Shashikala can address. The question reads, our embassies hardly connect with the local chambers. How do we change this? Who wants to go first? Saroja, you'd like to go first?
Okay.
No, let Sashi go first. That's all right.
Okay. We do by local chambers. Are you talking about the chambers that are based in the country of accreditation?
In Colombo.
Okay, so we are in constant touch with the Singapore-Sri Lanka Business Council of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce.
Don't ignore us anyway. Don't ignore us. The International Chamber of Commerce.
We will do that in the future, Dinesh. But we have gone with the Business Council because they've adopted a sort of sector-specific approach. And we've had discussions on specific sectors, including agribusiness, edutech, fintech, and ICT BPM. So those conversations are already taking place, and we have networked those companies in the chamber with counterparts at this end. So it is happening.
Thank you. Thank you. Saroja?
Well, I'll actually echo part of what Sashi said, because we have not only engaged with the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, for example, the Invest Sri Lanka Forum. We had a separate session for the UK where we had invited key business people who had experience with Sri Lanka to give testimony. And also we have been engaging in sector-specific chambers. For example, the Joint Apparel Association Forum, the Export Development Board brings to us also different sectors, the seafood exporting sector, and the spices, the tea board. So I think we are in engagement. Perhaps we haven't engaged with the ICC, but I think it's also up to contact us, you know where we are. So I think it's a two-way process. But yeah, we are definitely in touch with, because I think both Sashi and I in our previous lives have served in the Economic Affairs Division of the Foreign Ministry. So we are not unknown quantity to the Sri Lankan captains of industry and the business chambers. I myself served for 2 years in the Ministry of Economic Development. So the economic sector of Sri Lanka, the business sector of Sri Lanka, the development sector of Sri Lanka it's not unknown to us. So I think with our past experience, past experience, we have very good contacts. And another area that we're trying to engage, especially because that we have a very large diaspora, is the ethnic market. So introducing new products into the ethnic market is going to change the numbers of exports for Sri Lanka. And the other area that we're trying to do is also to engage with the cottage industry. We have a large number of old school networks here, because there are 32 old boys associations and I think almost an equal amount of girls schools associations. So a new initiative that we are trying to launch is to get them together and to handhold SMEs and micro industries to try and help even to bring in 100 pieces of one product out. I think is going to be more than what we had the year before. So these are some of the grassroots initiatives as well. And we do engage with the chambers, the stock exchanges, and the line agencies, EDB, BOI, and so on. So thank you.
Right, thank you. Rohitha, this question is to you. Somebody wants to know, if you are the foreign minister now, how would you manage the rating agencies? Maybe Sanjay can add to that, and also Rajiv.
Yeah, rating agencies make their own assessment, and there's a criteria they go by. But a lot of it sometimes may be out of the sources that they pick this criteria, development and assessment is something that we can always engage and discuss with them and explain better. I take it the idea is to be engaged rather than to just ignore. And moment we need not go on the path of reactionary rhetoric behavior in terms of any of these ratings they give. We are fairly a substantiated democracy in the world profile in terms of acceptability, and we have done better things in terms of countering terrorism for the whole world. And we are a major player in the region. We play well between the East and the West, and we are a center point for our development in a given scenario. So thereby we have a very strong profile. So the ratings are of a temporary nature, in my opinion. Ratings can change, but they are not in terms of to be taken in terms of permanency.
Recording stopped.
Perpetuity. So thereby I take it, we have to look at it objectively rather than being very subjective and be critical of that, but explain to them. And also let us engage with them and go by their source of information in place in the criteria judgment. I think that's how I look at it.
Thank you. Sanjay?
Dinesh, I would echo what Mr. Bogollagama.
Recording in progress.
It's a two-way street, right? So as much as it's like you need to explain to be understood.
I'm sure you can offer some good advice having worked at BCG.
No, absolutely. I think one of the things is the traditional engagement also was a little muted, I would say, because otherwise the rating agencies normally comes to Sri Lanka, they engage with the central bank, the Board of Investments, and many other players, and also get the sense of from the community and all that. Maybe that also was lacking, and I think at least in a way, I would say I would also encourage them to have a holistic engagement, right? I think being very honest and upfront, had zero engagement with any other rating agencies, with with BOI as head of BOI, in terms of what really we are doing. It's a tightrope we are walking. I agree that we can come out of it, but I think the important thing is to have that dialogue and to see like where they see the concerns, where we see the opportunities. It's a half full glass, and we could look at it either way, right? And I think that's the same. I think having that same viewpoint and being able to have that communication is vital, and it's a two-way street, right? As much as we need to reach out, and I think they also engaging us, Rajiv, and all the others, and the chambers, Dinesh, you, we all have to play a part.
Yeah. Can I go, Dinesh? Just a quick comment on that. I think I quite agree with Mr. Bogollagama and Sanjay both in terms of engagement, but unfortunately rating agents never seem to engage at an official level, and they seem to get the information from market participants and published information and form their own opinion. So I think that's something that we have to live with, and we're seeing this happening over and over again. But from our side, perhaps we should have a plan as to work towards a increase in the ratings, and I think collectively we should work that. But and if we do show that we are taking certain steps, perhaps they will take that into consideration in their overall rating. So I think we should collectively have a plan to identify the criteria to get back and improve our rating, and I think all these agencies should collectively work towards that. That's my take on it. Dinesh, I think you're muted. Dinesh, you're muted.
Bernard, maybe this is a question that you can take. My last two questions. Somebody wants to know, how do we take the political content out of these investment and by tourism promotion activities? You're muted.
The political content will always be there. That cannot be avoided. But then when we are trying to promote tourism or investment or whatever it is, there is a responsibility on our part to give the respective parties the correct image, correct position of the country, the economy, and the policies of the government. So by doing so, we will be communicating with these interested parties about the status in the country, which will enable the potential investor or the tourists to decide what course of action they should take. My belief is, the experience we have gone through during the last 2-3 decades indicate that political content is something that cannot be avoided, but it has to be tackled. Thank you.
Okay. Riaz, are you on board? Riaz? Okay. This is a very interesting question. Maybe the entire panel can take before I close this session. Somebody wants to know that they are saying that we are next to China and that we are not doing enough. Maybe Sanjay can start off.
I think, Dinesh, we are doing it. I think we're in the process of doing it in a way. You're absolutely right. So China is the largest consuming economy it's going to be, and now it's lifted 500 million people out of poverty. India is 1.3 billion going through that. Just don't not forget, like Pakistan, Bangladesh is the same, and of course East Africa is next there. So we are in epicenter. So we really need to take in advantage of it. And I think it's a lot of things that have been discussed, and a lot of the political things that Sri Lanka get dragged on to is because of the geopolitics. And I think that is the important thing, is to what is our role that we need to play. So I think the port city plays a vital role in that, right? So there's no port city story without Sri Lanka and the rest of the region. So the other way around, right? So I think we are, if you look at the strategy that we have put in, the holistically part of it, who are we are going after, what kind of business we are trying to bring in, right? Creating a conducive destination for services, headquarters, and so on and so forth. That is really taking advantage of it. And I think, meaning we play for a country like China when their ambitions in Africa. So we are kind of in the middle ground as well. So it helps in every way. So I think the question is channeling those opportunities and the investment opportunities and converting into realism is what really needs to drive it.
Okay. Rohitha, maybe you can comment. You managed it during very difficult times.
Yeah, Dinesh, I'd like to add to what BY Chairman just said. Not only China and India, look at India and Pakistan. There's no direct trade taking place. Be the center point to serve the Pakistan-India needs in terms of between the two countries, without allowing only the Middle Eastern countries to be the supply source or the conduit for Indo-Pakistan trade. So these are another area that I would like to add to what Sanjay said. Okay, we are the center point between the Far East and the Middle East. We are a center point between India and Pakistan, and also we can be the center point between China and also India, and also the African continent. I think the port city comes into that dimension. And we are a country in terms of the largest population presence in the region. No country can benefit other than us in terms of a neutral country, at the same time benefiting out of a huge mass market in the same continent. So that Asian continent, we are fairly well located, extremely well located, uniquely positioned, and we have a profile that is acceptable to all, and none is going to reject us. So I think we have to build on that, and our diplomacy will have to work on those lines. I think our diplomats can do a lot in doing that. I take it the headquarters will have to give them the encouragement and the message, right message in terms of the communications. I think they will take it forward in the given capitals, and I think we can see the results coming irrespective of the short-term difficulties we may experience in the epidemic.
Thank you, Rohitha. Thank you. I had a long question from an ex-ambassador. I summarized it, and I'd like to ask Lakshman maybe to comment first. How do we improve the effectiveness of our foreign service? You as an outsider, maybe you can comment.
Well, foreign service does not need a big change. There are very efficient foreign service officers who are doing very well, and certain countries definitely need political backing and political appointments. Even during Honorable Rohitha Bogollagama's time, or even before and after, there had been this mix had been there. Now, certain senior diplomatic service people in the foreign service are promoting and doing very well in those countries. And as I told you, the political appointees like us, also we have certain interest on the country. It all depends on the person's personality, how you perform as a person. There are people who can't perform as a performer because of his personal problems. If not, I think the foreign ministry has picked up very, very correctively certain people. There may be one or two wrong eggs in some places. Those things has to be corrected. But generally, when you take the senior people who have been representing are very good.
Thank you, Lakshmi. Thank you. Dr. Lakshmi, you can have the last word. Dr. Lakshmi? Okay, you're off. Okay. Bernard, can we have the last word from you on this?
Well, yes, in the sense, the foreign service, we can say we have through a competitive selection process, we have the cream of the people who have joined the service. What is needed is actually to meet the current challenges of the day. They need to be trained, they need to be equipped, and they need to be guided. Yeah. As it was indicated that there are considerable number of political appointees. They have been there in the past, and they are there now, and they will be there in the future. But as a service, we should be able to get our officials trained properly to meet the needs of the country as diplomatic agents.
Thank you. Lakshmi, you can have the last word. You're unmute. You're unmute.
Yes, Dinesh.
Yeah. How do you improve the effectiveness of the foreign service? Keep the answer to 1 minute.
Yes, as I told you earlier.
No, sorry, Lakshmi. Sorry, Lakshmi. Lakshmi, can you hear us? Unmute yourself. Lakshmi, you have to unmute. Oh dear. Okay. I think he's not getting it. So Arun, can I hand over to you to close this? Thank you very much. Arun, over to you.
Well, indeed, there has been a lot again that came up in that last session, and thank you very much. Jürgen Mohat. Jürgen Mohat.
Yes, can I answer that question, please?
Oh yeah, Lakshmi has come on. Yeah, please continue.
Service has a mix, good mix. I think there are young people who are very good. They are digitally oriented, unlike the old set, and they can perform very well in good stations. But there is also outsiders, not political and non-political division, to my mind, is an arbitrary one. Political means those who are not qualified, not capable, and who are selected for various positions. Non-political is even from outside. There are people with United Nations background. There are people with other backgrounds who have come to the foreign service and made a contribution. I don't have to say that. We all know from time to time, they have performed very well. For instance, I can tell you, Dhamini Korea, Kanaka Ratna during my time, they were much senior to me, have done their jobs so well. But there are also within the foreign service, like Mr. Gunatilaka, Ambassador Gunatilaka, and the present lot like Saroja Sirisena. They are she was my student and at BCIS, and then Sashikala Prema Vardhana. They are all very good. They are of quality. But there are sometimes you get odd people appointed for political reasons. I think that is the distinction. There is no problem of working with foreign service people and outsiders. There should be a mixed between the two to make it more strong and viable to meet the challenges of today. That is my way of looking at it. And all foreign services, whether in the Caribbean, Africa, even in the United States, have that mix. But if you take too many from the outside, it's not good for the service, and service must go on with that mix. So that is my answer to this question. Some may disagree with me, some may agree with me. So that's all I can say for the last question. I am now fairly old and I don't expect anything, but I think we should have good training courses in negotiation of treaties, which we don't do here in Sri Lanka, which we have done in the Caribbean, negotiation of contracts, which are very much part of the foreign service, and entering into agreements, making suggestions, and making an index. All those are very important aspects. Somehow or other we have been very negligent about.
Thank you, Laxari. Thank you very much, Laxari. I think that's you've conveyed a very pertinent point. Yeah, thanks very much, Dr. Laxari. Thanks very much indeed. Now we have a couple of questions really, to be directed to, as I mentioned, the former ambassador for Germany in Sri Lanka, but now in Mumbai, Jürgen Mohat, Dr. Jürgen Mohat.
Hi, I'm to have you on this program. Talk a little bit about what you're doing in India as Consul General.
Yeah, I'm responsible for whole West India as Consul General, and it means the destinations where more than 2/3 of German investments are going. Within my area, I have more than 1,200 German companies who are engaged there with India. I have the world's largest chamber of commerce, the Inter-German Chamber of Commerce, which is located in Mumbai. I have many representative offices from German regions, for example, also Rhine-Main, for example, Hamburg, because they are looking for special relations, Baden-Württemberg. It's a very active partnerships, particularly on the area of economy, science, and of course also culturally, and also between civil societies.
Okay, thank you. You are a very experienced diplomat. Can you give us some advice as to how an ambassador should work with chambers of commerce in promoting business?
Okay, now we have to see if you mean, two chambers. Normally Germany has its own chamber network abroad in more than 140 countries. Like then we have also in Sri Lanka now we have our own chamber, which is one partner. And then I think you mean how an embassy could work together with third countries' chambers. For me, the third German all chambers are very important partners because they have members, and their members are important for me as contacts. Because if I want to go out and meet business people and to raise the awareness about my country, right, the trade opportunities, investment opportunities, the opportunities to participate in trade shows, is normally I contact them whenever I go somewhere, even the local ones, the smaller local ones, I also did in Sri Lanka. And they were asking their members, sometimes if it's a bigger country or bigger cities, that we go by business. As for example, we take retail, or we take steel, or we take manufacturing. And then they invite and give me a forum, because I myself would not be able to reach out to all the individual members. And thus, they are basically a forum for me and are hosting something for a very first contact, where I could then present something, or very often in my case now in Mumbai, I bring with me some more refined experts who are much more knowledgeable than I do how to visit trade shows, or I bring somebody from our German chamber of commerce with me, or somebody from our investment promotion company. But normally it's a number one contact wherever I go.
Thank you, Jürgen. Thank you very much, Dr. Jürgen Mohat. Now, this webinar has covered a lot of ground. We would like at this juncture perhaps to remind ourselves of what Robert Blake mentioned right at the outset. And that's a significant remark he made when he said that a small country has a great deal more work to be done by the embassies and missions overseas. There's a great deal more work to be done than in an established large marketplace, or should we say a larger country. So with that in mind, we were helped to appreciate that there's a great deal of training that is required. In fact, Dr. Laksari said there needs to be a mix, those that are career diplomats, and then those that come in from the outside. But whatever it is, we have been helped to appreciate that there is a need for a great deal of training. And the training is not just in language skills and etiquette and so on and so forth, but rather to be able to engage. The expectations are very high if we are entering this realm. And so there is the necessity on correct selection on the one hand, and the abilities and competencies need to be taken note of. And in certain areas, in certain markets, in certain countries, there are specific skills and abilities that are needed. And it is required then, with that appropriate training, also a natural ability. I think we heard the word personality being mentioned in the same area. There are certain personalities that will obviously do a little better than the others. And are they recognized? They ought to be recognized.